Welcome back to Clarkston Lighthouse Guidance. My name's Chandler Fleming. I'm the owner and chief therapist at Clarkston Lighthouse Counseling here in Clarkston.
Hi there, and I'm Victoria Fleming, and I am also a therapist and owner of Clarkston Lighthouse Counseling. Welcome to the show today. Today, Chandler, we're going to talk about the ever-pressing anxiety.
Not anxiety, that always stresses me out.
I agree. Feeling anxious?
No, not as much as I used to.
I may be a little bit, I don't know.
I feel better now.
But today we're going to talk about feeling anxious, being stressed, and the reality that it seems like more and more people identify with feeling anxious, with feeling stressed. And so we just want to spend some time today looking at what anxiety is and analyzing why. Why does it seem like it's more epidemic? So Chandler, as we look at what anxiety is, what is anxiety?
It's like feeling nervous and anxious and uneasy about things. It's just not feeling good.
I found it humorous. If you look at the definition, we have a feeling of worry, nervousness, or unease, typically about an imminent event or something with an uncertain outcome. As I've shared that with some people, they've laughed and said, sounds like life. You know, it sounds like living. Yeah. And there's something that's imminent, there's something with an uncertain outcome at all times. And, just some synonyms that would be, concern, worry, feeling nervous. And like you said, that feeling of unease that comes, and it can come with living. When you start looking at mental health anxiety, we are looking at that it is characterized with a state of excessive uneasiness and apprehension, and it's not unusual for there to be a compulsive behavior, or even some panic attacks.
Yeah.
So there are levels. There is a continuum. Everyone at some time is going to feel anxious. They're going to feel worried. They're going to feel uneasy, but then it can become chronic and pressing. Some common symptoms of anxiety, Chandler, are what? What are some of the symptoms?
Well, let's see.
I heard that.
Heart fluttering, feeling warm, shaky, sense of dread, nausea, upset stomach, headache,
trouble sleeping,
muscle tension, difficulty concentrating.
Yeah.
So, it's interesting to say because there's a lot of different symptoms of anxiety, and it's important to look that there's an overlap with anxiety and depression. We used to think of anxiety and depression kind of being totally different things, but sometimes with just the use of medication, we find that anxiety responds well to both depression medications and anxiety medications. So we think it's kind of the same illness. Some people are more prone to report anxiety than depression. So men tend to have a bias. If they feel the same list of symptoms, they're much more likely to say, I feel anxious or stressed. And women are much more likely to say, I feel depressed. So It's important to remember that.
Yeah.
And the other thing, just in general, is we all live in a world full of anxiety. I mean, there are stressful things, it's a busy time. And so how do you separate between just kind of the day in, day out anxiety? It's really looking at functioning. Is it really impairing things like your job or your relationships or things like that?
Right, and I agree, I do. I think we do need to look at the functionality part of it. People who start having crippling anxiety or really are struggling with anxiety are going to have a greater difficulty in their day-to-day tasks. So much difficulty concentrating that it's hard to press through the day and to get what needs to be done. But it is better to treat anxiety early before it does begin to manifest in a more chronic way, so that you can begin to address those issues.
And anxiety causes anxiety. It's interesting, one of the number one causes of having a panic attack or an anxious attack is having a previous one. So once people kind of learn to identify what it is and understand what it is, it helps them out a ton to just say, hey, this is just a feeling. And one of my favorite things about feelings is that we need to recognize that feelings are indicators, not dictators.
Right.
So they kind of indicate to us that something's wrong, but just because we have a feeling, we don't have to go with it, which is a good thing, because sometimes I have this feeling like I want to smack someone. And it's a strong feeling. But I wouldn't do that. So it's an indicator, hey, something's wrong here, I want to do something about it. but it's not a dictator. I ultimately choose how I deal with that feeling.
I like that. And in fact, one of my favorite quotes from the Dare Workbook by Barry McDonough, on the back it says, the solution to an anxiety problem is not by trying to act calmly, but by acting bravely. And I think that's so important, because I think, like you said, if I start focusing on just be calm, breathe. I'm actually giving more attention to the anxiety, which can increase the anxiety. But what I need to do is, gosh, I really, just what you said about smacking, I'd really like to smack someone, but I'm not going to. I really don't want to go to work. It's making me feel anxious, but I'm going to.
Oh, sure.
You know, but it was fascinating. I do find that as clients are coming in, and as I have conversations with friends, that there is this question of, Victoria, are more people anxious? What is going on? It seems epidemic. Do you get that?
I think there's definitely an increase in anxiety. I think our society kind of pushes it, so I definitely think anxiety is more prevalent than it used to be.
And it's fascinating because there is a doctor who sampled, Jean Twing, who sampled 7 million people, so a lot of people.
Okay.
And she was looking at the contrast between the teens in the 2010s to the mid-1980s and was trying to assess, is it just because more people are talking about it? Is it just because anxiety is maybe kind of pop culture or whatever? But as she was looking at it, there was definitely indication that the teens of more recent, the 2010s, 38% more likely to have trouble remembering, so the concentration part, 74% more likely to have trouble sleeping, very common with anxiety, 2 times more likely to see a mental health professional. For those issues. And then when they started looking at college students, 50% were more likely to say they feel overwhelmed. And then the adults are reporting restless sleep, poor appetite, and difficulty concentrating.
Yeah.
You know, so I think it was fascinating because there is part of me that I want to say, oh, just it's more talked about. It's more okay to say that I'm anxious. It's more okay to say I'm depressed. But when this woman, and what she did is she didn't come right out and say, do you feel anxious? Are you anxious? She identified symptoms of anxiety and depression and had people take an inventory. And as they were doing the inventory, it became very clear that in this, 40-year gap, 30 to 40-year gap, there's definitely been an escalation in the amount of anxiety being, and the impact of anxiety on our culture.
Oh, yeah.
And on our people. So what are you seeing as the impact?
I think it does affect more people, but I think, mid-'80s, and I'm sorry, I was a teenager in the mid-'80s, no cell phones, no FaceTime, no internet. So all the electronics of today weren't there. And I think about all the people I know that are totally stressed out because of those electronics. And I think that it's kind of this generation is called the me generation. And one of the theories that Twings identifies is that our relationships and our community ties are a lot weaker.
They are weaker.
And I think they are weaker, but it's somewhat definitional. I know people who talk about all these great friends they have, but most of them are electronic friends. And even in friendships, there is definitely a pressure to keep up and to make sure you're getting your text messages or your Instagrams. I'm sorry, I'm old, so I say text messages. Or,
There's probably something new I don't even know.
Twitter, or whatever kids do, tweet to each other. So there's this constant barrage of messages. And I think that it causes those relationships to be far more superficial.
I do too, and I think it's interesting going back to the definition of an imminent event. So if I post something on my phone, the imminent event is someone could like it, someone could comment on it, and so I could just obsessively pick up my phone, and then the second part of that with an unknown outcome, with an uncertain outcome, and I don't know if people are gonna like it. I don't know if people are even gonna notice it. And so I do find it fascinating. I know with some of my clients, I will limit how often you allow yourself to check your phone. Do it on the half hour, do it on the hour, but don't let it become this constant looking, because that makes me feel anxious just even doing it. And I think that's true in some ways, even with all of our fitness wear, where people can be so aware aware of what is my heart rate, and am I sleeping well, and have I gotten enough steps? And so there is this sense of pressing that can feel very anxiety provoking.
Oh, sure. So I think it's important for us to really look at what is our community and how do we get more connected? How do we get more real? Direct with people? How do we have conversations, even if it is a Twitter message back and forth, that tends to be more genuine, more personal, more relational? How do we be more supportive over electronic media? I wish that we were less electronic. I don't think that's going to happen. I think it's probably going to increase a little bit.
Well, you can't go to McDonald's without there being a kiosk. I can't go up to, most of them you can still go to a person.
But there's still a lot.
Yeah, but it is a kiosk. A way that I would encourage people to build those relationships and that community is used to, if you were in a waiting room and waiting with other people for your turn to see the doctor, orthodontist, dentist, whatever it may be, people would talk with each other. But now so often you do see, as you're walking through a waiting room, everyone's on their own phone and they've zoned out. And there's almost a sense of, don't interrupt me.
Well, that's why
with
I
your
do
presence.
it, because I don't want to talk to some stranger in a waiting room. And I think, there's different levels that can be very anxiety producing to people because they're not used to it. They do move more and more in that direction. And I think the big key is really more personal, direct relationships with people who you do have a relationship with in a true connection, more than those superficial connections.
Yeah, not just a Facebook friend where I have maybe 375 of them, but someone who, if I needed a meal cooked, if I needed someone to help me out with something, would actually be there.
Yep.
Yeah, so maybe redefine friend.
Right.
What is a friend? So another theory that this doctor had as she was looking at the data from the 7 million people was she was looking at the fact that we've become more focused on goals such as money, fame, and image. And I thought that was interesting, image, which Tim Kasser's work has shown is highly correlated with anxiety and depression. So as we're focusing on money, image, and our fame, where does that leave us? Very forward focused, I think, instead of present focused.
Oh, for sure.
And we do. I've often found myself thinking that my life is made up of the millions and millions of moments, and they're the current moments. They're the being right here, right now with you moments, the seeing the sunset moments. It's not necessarily my graduating high school, graduating college, getting my master's. Those were great and they were big, but if that's what I'm living for,
right,
and people's feedback from achieving those goals, then it can leave us feeling very empty.
Yep.
So what do you think about that?
I think about our vacation out west, and it's kind of corny, but when we went out west, we were looking for a lot of things. We were in the Rocky Mountains, and a big part of the trip, and I told the family before we took this trip, the journey is part of the destination. Driving through Rocky Mountain National Park, it wasn't stopping at each of the peaks, but it was also the ride between the peaks. And when you put yourself in that mindset of what's beautiful along this ride, I'm at one peak and I'm going to be going downhill and back up to another peak. What's beautiful today? What's great about it? It really did improve the journey. And when people get into that mindset of looking for the journey and looking for what's exciting at this moment, it helps a ton.
And I think it's that whole concept. I remember having so clear the image of having a big present in front of me. And I have to be present to open the present of this right here and now.
Yeah.
And I know it's a lot of presence, but it is important. It is the journey. Or Hannah Montana and her song, "It's the Climb."
It's the climb.
I
started singing that pretty cornily during the trip.
And it is. It's the climb. It's the process. And I think when we're focused on the image, on fame, on money, there's always, especially in a day of social media, where there is always going to be someone with more money, with more fame, and with a better image. And so whose level of fame, whose level of image, how much money becomes enough? And if we're not careful, we're in a state of constant comparison, which is pressure, which is stress, which is anxiety producing, and it leaves me feeling like I'm never enough.
Sure.
And that is never enough. that my present is never enough. So that was the second one of her theories. The third one of her theories was in reference to too lofty goals, that our expectations are just too high, and then also that our self-view may be a little too high. And so she has it written out as expectations are too high, probably because of the emphasis on you can be anything you want to be, and highly positive self-views.
Sure.
What say you?
Well, I oftentimes tell my clients, by the time I was 14, I was too tall and I wore glasses. The likelihood of me being an astronaut was gone at 14 years old. Now I'm a lot older than 14. As much as I train and want to be, I'm never going to be a professional quarterback. It's just not going to happen. And you know what? To be honest, at 19 or 20, no matter how hard I worked or tried, I would never be a professional quarterback. And so it's having an unrealistic expectation of ourselves and really ignoring the true strengths that we have on an emphasis on some sort of idealized desire that may not be there. And I do think that there should be working towards things, but you gotta be realistic.
And I think it's fascinating. If I truly if I could go back and be 16, 17, 18, and the entire world is at my disposal and I can truly be anything, can I admit that's overwhelming in and of itself?
Sure.
Because it's hard enough, to kind of figure out what I want to do with my life. Well, if I'm being fed that everything is available to me, then it leaves me, really, to be honest, with too many options. It's too much. And so there's something actually liberating about being able to have a more realistic expectation instead of, the entire world is my option, being like, you know what, I have some math abilities, but definitely not my favorite. I have some science abilities, or I may not, and definitely not my favorite. So at least if I were that 16, 17, 18-year-old, I could just totally sweep off, I'm not going to be an engineer, I'm not going to be a medical doctor, I'm not going to be an accountant. And then that still leaves a whole wide world of options, but at least I've ruled out some. And I sometimes think that having too high of an expectation and maybe even too lofty a view of what I can accomplish,
yeah, and
it
failing
can
to
be
recognize
overwhelming.
trade-offs too. Being a great level lover of Clarkston sports, it's very, very difficult to be an awesome football player and an awesome baseball player and an awesome wrestler. And sports and athletics are becoming more and more elite, especially here in Clarkston, and you have to specialize. It's much more, you don't have to, but the vast majority of people are not going to succeed unless they specialize.
Right.
Sure, there's natural gifts and abilities, and I think of some football players that played basketball, but there are trade-offs. I can't be the world's greatest actor and the world's greatest football player at the same time, most likely.
Right.
It just makes it more and more unlikely.
And who was the star last year and for the years, the free throw?
Foster Loyer. Foster Loyer
Okay.
is my hero. I never really met him. I saw him play basketball. But I had all these kids that I would see in my practice who wanted to be great at something. And some of them very directly, they wanted to be great at basketball. So I'd ask them, how many free throws did you practice? And then I'd say, do you know how many Foster does? Because I hear these legends, the legend of Foster. How many basketball, how many shots after practice he was shooting. If you really want something and you have the ability or you have the capability of developing that ability, the next step is working towards it and enjoying working towards it.
Yeah, well, it's being an Olympic athlete. Those individuals are getting up at 4:30 in the morning, and they are doing a routine before they've even had breakfast, gone to school, and done everything else. And then they're leaving school and going immediately and doing the hours of practice. And so it is an unrealistic expectation
And
and too high a self-view if I think I'm going to be the next gold medal
Yeah.
athlete,
Yeah.
Olympic star.
And one of those trade-offs are you better be practicing.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So I do. So it's fascinating. There's a book that has swept the country, maybe the world, I don't know, but by Sean Aker, called The Happiness Advantage. And this is a gentleman who went to Harvard, started watching the Harvard students as they would come in. And this is what a key statement: conventional wisdom holds that if we work hard, we will be more successful. And if we are more successful, then we will be happy. If we can just find that great job, win that next promotion, lose those 5 pounds, happiness will follow. But recent discoveries in the field of positive psychology have shown this formula is actually backwards. Happiness fuels success, not the other way around.
Oh, sure.
And I think if we're not careful, it's when I graduate high school, when I graduate college, once I've finished my master's, once I get married, once I have my 2.5 kids, then I'm going to be happy. But what he found is that here you've got brilliant minds, Harvard, brilliant minds. So all these brilliant minds have come together, and now they're feeling this certain tension because they're same. It's the same playing field. And the ones that would hunker down and just focus on academia and were holed up on just making the straight A's, the A pluses, were not as happy because they were so focused. It's that goal part. They were so focused on achieving and being better than that they were missing the present.
Yeah.
They're missing the journey. They're missing the climb.
One of the things I oftentimes talked about to people too is I want to be better, but I am okay today. And that focus of, you know what, if I don't get better, I'm still okay today, is a really, really important principle, and being happy where you are. And then once you're happy where you are, you have the energy and the success to move on to other things.
And I love that concept that happiness fuels success, not the other way around. And so as I'm savoring the moments, as I'm being happy where I'm at, then that energy is going to fuel just a dynamic. I see it kind of as a dynamic energy that's going to propel me to greater success.
For sure.
And so I think we need to look at how much of our anxiety is being perpetuated really by wrong thinking.
Yeah, for sure.
So what are your thoughts? What are you seeing?
I'm seeing the same thing that you're talking about, that we need to learn to be content in today. We need to learn to love ourselves and be in the moment. We need to have realistic expectations. We need to recognize that in our society, stress and tension are common, and know when that our anxiety is getting out of control, that we are too busy, that we're focused way too much on the future, and slow down. And those are the important things. Awareness is the beginning of change.
Yeah, absolutely. And so really that was our goal of our show today, is we know anxiety is on the rise, anxiety and depression, and it's not just our imagination that there are more and more people. The studies are indicating that is true. I do think technology plays a part.
Oh, for sure.
But I really appreciated those 3 theories. And I think if we will begin to connect better when we readjust our expectations, when we really look at what is success, and that is not the Hollywood version of success. If you feel like you are struggling with anxiety, deal with it. And the sooner that you deal with it, the better. And there are some very great mental health therapists out there who can help talk you through.
Yeah. Thank you so very much for watching our program. We mentioned electronic stuff earlier. Please look for us on Facebook and YouTube. Like us. Give us the thumbs up. Send us on to other people. And thank you very much for watching.
Have a wonderful day.
Bye.
The views expressed in this show are for general educational purposes only and do not constitute professional advice on any subject matter, nor do they necessarily reflect the views or opinions of its guests or of Independence Television. If mental health assistance is needed, please seek professional licensed treatment.